Lo anunciamos esta mañana, tuvimos una gran sorpresa de año nuevo y lo logramos. Tenemos primero un amigo de la casa en Sonar, los saludamos a todos ustedes conectados en nuestras plataformas, en nuestro canal de YouTube, Alain Johannes, querido.
Oye, ¿cómo estás?
¿Cómo estás, querido?
Genial,
Tanto
genial.
tiempo, un amigo de la
¡Feliz
casa.
año a todos!
Primera entrevista que hacemos en una semana.
Sí. Sí.
Y por supuesto, Barrett Martin, uno de nuestros héroes de los 90, parte de algunos de nuestros discos favoritos con Screaming Trees, con Mad Season y un largo, etcétera. Barrett está hace un rato en Chile, vamos a comentar qué lo trae por acá. Tiene una larga historia también con Brasil, ha colaborado con Nando Reis, músico de Titaes y otros proyectos alucinantes. También ha girado con músicos latinoamericanos. Y bueno, vamos a conversar sobre un regalo, una novedad que va a dejar a varios marcando ocupados luego de disfrutar esta entrevista y conversación que iniciamos ahora mismo. Barrett, thank you for your time.
Mucho gusto. Thank you for having me.
Well, firstly, how did you meet each other? How did you meet?
At the rancho?
At the rancho.
Rock
Actually, what was 2014, was it? I think it goes back to...
I thought it was before that,
Before,
but that's already 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's already 10 years. No, I think before. Obviously, I remember we were at the airport one time.
Yeah.
With Chris, with Cornell, and
That's
you
right.
guys were in line as well.
That's right.
At the airport. That's like kind of the unofficial first time. Yeah.
But that was 10 years ago too?
No, that was 99.
Okay.
90s, yeah.
Josh was playing in trees, and we were all at the airport. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ok, el inicio obviamente de esta conversación es cómo se conocieron Barrett con Alain. Y bueno, está una anécdota del aeropuerto. Se conocieron en el aeropuerto y el Rancho de la Luna.
Rancho de Luna,
hace
sí.
solo 10 años atrás.
Un poco más. You see, Barrett se acuerda un poco más. He remembers a bit. I trust his memory more than mine. Su memoria está mejor. Yo creo que más de 10. I think you're right.
Okay, well, we love Barrett that knowing that you went to an Inti Illimani show.
Yes.
And I was wondering, how did you discover the band? ¿Cómo descubriste Inti Illimani? Nosotros nos enteramos que Barrett estaba en Chile a través de este posteo en Instagram, muy entusiasta con un show de Inti Illimani.
Okay. I'll speak in English because I'm
obviously.
sorry I
No
don't
worries.
speak Spanish well. I can kind of understand, but I can't speak it. I'm here also because a good friend of mine is an astrophysicist with a telescope in the Atacama, and I came to help him with that project. And one of his friends recommended Inti Illimani and said it was one of the greatest bands he'd ever seen in Europe. So they bought tickets for us. And I will say this, I was a college professor for 7 years. And so I studied ethnomusicology in graduate school, and we learned a lot about Chilean music and nueva canción and everything that happened during Pinochet. And I was aware of this kind of music, but had never seen it live. I listened to Victor Jara and Violeta Parra and groups like that. And then to see them was just incredible because I saw the incredible musicianship, the virtuosity of the musicians, and the sophistication of the compositions. And I could understand a lot of what they were singing. And I was just deeply moved by it. And I haven't seen anything like that since I saw Buena Vista Social Club in Havana, Cuba in 1999. When they filmed the documentary, I was in the audience at that show. And that old way of playing is so beautiful because it's being forgotten. It's being forgotten. People aren't learning how to play like that. Very few people anyway. And so they're a national treasure, just like Alain is too. Alain is a virtuosic player that...
Totally agree with that.
That's why we play so well together. We love working on records together. So, because we've played on several records independently.
It's
Desert Sessions.
Desert Sessions. We did Patron stuff, and then and now we've been working on this amazing record. It started how many years ago did you and I jam? 3-4 years ago, right?
At my studio in Olympia,
In Washington.
I have a studio in my hometown, and Alain came up and we did some basic tracks that are part of the record we're now finishing. We started the record in Sao Paulo with Peter Buck, and then we've been doing overdubs here at Alain's studio, and we even did some stuff in Iceland. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a very world music record.
Rancho, the dubs at Rancho.
And we did a lot of stuff at Rancho de la Luna, of course. So,
Bueno, como pueden ver, primero la emotividad, el sentir algo que Barrett no disfrutaba desde su experiencia en Cuba con Buenavista Social Club. Él ya estaba, primero la conexión, él viene con su esposa, viene a encontrarse con un amigo astrofísico en Atacama por una serie de estudios donde él va a colaborar, y está el link y el interés, que eso no es muy usual, también por la música chilena en el apagón cultural, en la dictadura, una cercanía con Víctor Jara, una cercanía también con la emotividad de Inti Illimani, y el reencontrarse con una música que él conocía, pero eso es lo lindo de la música en vivo, que difícilmente sea reemplazable, que es encontrarse con la vibra de las canciones. Quizás no es su idioma nativo, pero entender la emotividad y el trasfondo político a través de lo que aún genera Inti Illimani. Él lo ve como un tesoro. Nosotros también coincidimos en que Inti Illimani es parte de nuestra historia, de nuestro apego, de nuestra cultura, y también el reconocer a Alain como un genio, parte de una generación de músicos que no tiene que ver con números, sino con la obra firmada. Una obra firmada que ahora tiene un súper regalo que vamos a comentar en exclusiva. You Got Me By Surprise. Tenemos una nueva banda, un nuevo proyecto de Alain Johannes, Barrett Martin y otros personajes. Tell us a little bit about this project besides this mix of holidays, encounters with some closer friends.
Okay.
There is a huge project behind this first Chilean experience.
Yes. So Peter Buck and I have been on about 35 albums where we were in the band playing together. And we thought, okay, we need to do a record and form a band where we can play with our favorite songwriters and musicians and make our own kind of band, like where we're just collectively creating together. And so Alan and the great British singer Duke Garwood, who did a lot of projects with Mark Lanigan and many things. I mean, you worked with Duke extensively. And so, and Dave Ketching from the Rancho de la Luna studio. So we just all wrote songs together.
That's a great team.
Everybody sings, everybody plays something. And like right now we kind of have a double album, which might be 2 separate albums or 1 double. We're not sure yet, but it's insane. It's going to come out September 19th through Sony. That's our distributor. And we're going to be releasing singles prior to that, up to the release. So right now we're getting everything ready to mix in Barcelona, and Alan, take it away.
Yeah. So,
sorry.
No, si se quiere,
I'm shocked.
Yeah, exactly. It's been an incredible experience. ¿Lo puedo decir en español?
Sí.
Entonces, la química que tenemos con Barrett y con Duke Garwood, que fue gran colaborador de Mark Lanigan, y estar ahí en el rancho, y todo desarrollándose, y ahora que viene Peter también, Peter Buck, y después se van a hacer más overdubs, los últimos toques en el estudio de Barrett. They're coming over in March, right?
Yeah, they're coming back in March to my studio.
Entonces estamos, lo interesante, estamos agregando, esta mañana me desperté y toqué saxofón.
Wow.
Puse 3 pistas de saxo, first thing in the morning, sin café, ¿verdad? Y estamos cantando coros, o sea, agregando cosas como toda esa base de improvisación y jams, ¿no? Y ahora desarrollando en canciones con Duke está cantando, Barrett va a cantar, yo voy a cantar.
And Dave.
Sí.
Dave Ketching, un tipo que nosotros tuvimos la chance de conversar, es el tipo de Eagles of Death Metal, Rancho de la Luna, un super nice guy, David, super nice guy. He has a mezcal with Butch Vig.
That's right.
Rancho de la Luna mezcal.
Yep.
También un emprendedor que recuerdo su marca de mezcal con Butch Vig. Pero bueno, Peter Buck is coming to Chile for the second time of his life.
Yeah, he told me, okay, so we started planning this trip to go up to Atacama when we were in Brazil. We've been in Brazil for 4 months. And Peter said, I never really got to see Chile because we played Santiago and then we left the next day. So he is arriving on the 4th. And we're going to drive up to the Atacama Desert and just explore the Atacama.
Bueno, notición absoluto. Doug, Dave Ketching, Peter Buck, Alain Johannes. Y bueno, nuestro amigo invitado, Barrett Martin, en un super proyecto. What is the band called?
Drink the Sea. What is that in Spanish?
Drink the Sea, en exclusiva.
Bebida la mer.
Beber el mar.
Drink the Sea.
Drink the Sea, sí. Beber el mar.
Y bueno, se viene álbum en septiembre. Va a salir Like the Old School Way with a Major behind it. Sony.
Yep.
Y bueno, super disco LP. Any thoughts about the first single release date?
The first single is the first Friday of June. I think that's June
Okay.
5th.
Yeah.
So there's a single in June, July, August, and then the album is September 19th.
Yeah.
Bueno, y pocos estímulos tenemos. Peter Buck en Chile, tenemos un super proyecto, Drink of the Sea.
Yeah,
No,
Drink the Sea.
Drink the Sea, sorry.
Yeah.
Drink the Sea. Y bueno, el 5 de junio vamos a tener también el primer avance de este disco que va a salir en septiembre. I imagine that there is several plans about touring.
Oh
this,
yes, we
this
will play.
album.
We will play Chile
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Because some of the album, a lot of it is recorded here, so we have to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Bueno, ya increíble, también va a haber un show con todas estas leyendas del rock y con una historia muy importante en los 90s. Una historia que vamos a seguir ahondando con Barrett, con Alain. I was wondering, for the fans, Barrett, you just released like 4 books.
Yeah, I have 4
at this point of your life.
I'm working on the 5th one right now.
About what? Interesting.
The 5th book is about kind of the mystical experience of music and the way that it evolves us as people. And this is kind of part, like when I was in graduate school, we studied world music, but I also studied things like human rights and linguistics. And when you study music at the cultural level, like the anthropological level, you realize that it's really an evolutionary mechanism. It helps societies evolve collectively. It helps us evolve individually. So the book I'm working on now is kind of everything that I've learned about music in my life.
Side.
Yeah, and how it helps us to see the world as it truly is. I've always believed that human rights and standing up for that all over the world is one of the most important things a musician can do. That's why I highly respect the musicians of Chile that did that, and in Brazil, and in the United States.
And the human rights topic is very strong.
Of course, it has to be, especially now. But the United States has that history with the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. So some of the biggest music movements in the world had to do with human rights. So the American Civil Rights Movement, Nueva Canción, Tropicalia in Brazil, which was against the
Dantes.
Yeah, exactly. And punk rock. Mm-hmm. I mean, American and British punk rock is...
Bueno, antes de íbamos a hablar del cuarto libro de Mark Lanegan, pero bueno, aquí hay demasiada información que compartir con ustedes. Barrett está trabajando en su 5º libro que tiene que ver con el lado místico de la música, también con una conexión muy espiritual con los derechos humanos que han sido parte de muchos movimientos en Chile también, y también en Brasil, en Sudamérica. Comentábamos la Tropicalia, comentábamos también la historia de Estados Unidos con muchas tomas civiles, una temperatura ciudadana. But I was thinking about your last book that you just released on the last year. For the fans, for me, for the radio, remember, saw some pages, reviewing some stuff. Your latest book, The Greatest Band That Ever Was and Was, in our point of view, of course, with that subjective point of things, was a great compliment to Mark Lanegan books. So what was it like for you to return to that part of your life with that book?
I needed to write, and I was talking to Mark regularly right up till a month before he passed away. Mm-hmm. And he had sent me rough drafts of that book as well as his follow-up book, Devil in a Coma, and asked me for comments. And so I kind of told him some of the stuff I remembered, some of the more humorous stuff. And he said, dude, you have to write the comedy version of this, because the truth is, as dark as Mark's book is, we also laughed all the time because we saw the world together and we saw both the light and the dark of that. Mm-hmm. And so I just had been writing short stories about more of the funny things that happened to us. And I felt like that needed to be the book that I needed to write, because the Screaming Trees really did have a sense of humor. And all of those guys were very smart, well-read, literate guys. And I think that sometimes that gets forgotten in rock and roll because go ahead.
That is exactly the point that are going to discuss, because, bueno, lo primero, fue para los que no saben, estoy tratando como, hay tanta información con esto que estamos conversando que es difícil como poner las cosas en una perspectiva, pero lo que comentamos es que el libro de de Barrett Martin sobre los Screaming Trees tiene un buen punto de complemento con los 2 libros que lanzó Mark Lanegan. Un libro que fue pospuesto en contexto por la partida de Mark Lanegan y que, bueno, no solo la partida de Mark Lanegan, la de Van también, parte de la historia de los Screaming Trees. Un libro que también tuvo una retroalimentación muy rica. ¿Por qué tan rica? Porque siempre hubo una buena comunicación en los miembros de Screaming Trees. Una comunicación que muchos fans nos explican por qué la banda nunca se reunió, y de eso me gustaría conversar con Barrett, con Barrett, y por supuesto con también la opinión de Alain al respecto. Going back to that project, that context, that era, there is, in general, in the rock history, there is a lot of drama behind this sort of stories, memories, or whatever. But you guys in Screaming Trees, as you said, always keep a sense of humor, very with a very good vibe and friendship, and after separating too, you just mentioned with the emails, with the dark sense of humor.
Yeah.
So I imagine that you received several offers to reunite.
Oh yeah,
with the band.
We had.
Why it never happened?
Well, we had offers to play all over the world at festivals in 2015, 2016, and so our booking agents were like getting offers and lining up a tour. And sort of at the last minute, Mark decided he didn't want to do it, which is not surprising. Mark was kind of like that. He'd be into something and then not into it. So we didn't do the tour. But the point is we had remained friends, and we released the Last Words album, and we had collaborated on Mark had done some work on film soundtrack stuff that I was producing, and so we always had a creative relationship. It just didn't remanifest as being in a band together, But I think that that's a healthy way for a band to dissolve, but everybody continues to do their work. I mean, I love Mark's solo records, and I think that and Alan worked on him, I think, on almost all of those, right?
Well, it's since 2010, a little bit of Bubblegum too, yeah.
So Mark is kind of a central factor in a lot of this stuff, because
this community
that is, from Screaming Trees, but also the Rancho and people like Alan.
Mm-hmm.
Bueno, lo que comentábamos, uno tiene demasiados recuerdos con una época que incluso marcó la era de Sonar, el buen sentido del humor, las buenas vibras que mantuvo Barrett, del resto de los Screaming Trees, incluso lo que comentábamos anteriormente, después de lamentablemente la partida de Mark Lanegan, hubo ofertas para reunir a los Screaming Trees, porque como un grupo con tanta buena onda no se iba a reunir, y la retromanía vende, hay que decirlo. Pero bueno, Mark nunca estuvo en el mood de una reunión. Mark siempre ha sido... He hates nostalgia in general. Nostalgia in general.
Right.
Retromania, whatever.
Right.
Y esa fue la razón de que Mark Lanegan no solo quería avanzar. Y bueno, estamos acá con puros personajes que avanzan todo el rato, valoran su pasado, pero miran hacia adelante. Y este super proyecto también es algo que los va a seguir teniendo muy motivados, al igual que otros proyectos que hemos comentado con Alain, con Barrett en esta entrevista. Both of you guys were part of very talented and underrated bands, discussing or talking about the 11, for example, or Screaming Trees, of course. I was wondering, what do you remember from those times when every major was desperately searching for the next Nirvana in underground cults circuit? La pregunta, bueno, ¿qué recuerdan siendo dos miembros de bandas? Se me olvida traducir. Siendo dos miembros de bandas completamente subvaloradas, que recuerdan ese tiempo cuando estaban todos los ejecutivos desesperados pagando millones de dólares por buscar al siguiente Nirvana.
Sí. Bueno, me acuerdo de esa época que, bueno, para 11 entramos ahí y siempre fuimos como... Nos metieron con el grunge, pero la verdad que teníamos más la relación de amistad y conexión de creatividad con Soundgarden, con Pearl Jam. Obvio que Jack Irons tenía amistad con Eddie Vedder, pero nosotros no conocimos a Soundgarden al principio. Y la única forma que 11 fue difundida fue por la ayuda de nuestros amigos de Soundgarden y Pearl Jam, y después Queens of the Stone Age. Pero yo me acuerdo cuando de repente estábamos abriendo el show de ¿cómo se llama? De Candlebox y bandas que eran la segunda ola de grunge, que fueran como Silverchair, todo eso, que tenían mucho más apoyo, o sea, mucho apoyo, depende, pero 11 era simplemente la mala suerte de estar en sellos que no cachaban, y un poco difícil del marketing de 11 siempre fue, por la razón de la música y de dos cantantes, y es un trío de órgano, bueno, tú sabes cosas así. Pero yo siempre valoré a Screaming Trees porque me encantaba la voz, la forma de tocar, las composiciones. It's like we were almost like musicians. I mean, bands, you know?
Yeah. Well, and there's like, okay, I'm still waiting for the next Nirvana. I'm waiting for that. Someday right now there's some kids rehearsing in a basement that'll be the next Nirvana, and I'm waiting for them. But there is this thing about music, is something that I'm writing about right now. Bands that are too sophisticated, that are like really good songwriters and maybe have like a more sophisticated nuance, aren't always the ones that have the most commercial success.
True.
Really, bands that have huge commercial success meet a kind of common denominator. It doesn't mean they're not good bands and write good songs, but it's not at the leading edge of things. That's just the way it is. So if your band is a little too smart, a little too sophisticated, a little too experimental, you probably will be one of those bands that's highly regarded but not commercially successful. Mm-hmm. I think that's a decision too. Like the Screaming Trees, we made the songwriting the priority. Like that was the most important thing, like to write the best songs we could possibly write. We had a couple songs that were hits on the radio, but that wasn't what the band was really.
And the Cameron Crowe soundtrack helps a lot.
Well,
Singles.
Our song was the biggest single on that soundtrack, so it helped the soundtrack more than it helped us. And as I wrote about in my book, we were our own worst enemies as far as like our own self-destruction. I mean, we can't blame everybody for the problems that the Screaming Trees had. Like that was the four of us.
Or the issues from that era.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think that a very high percentage of exceptionally good bands came out of the Pacific Northwest, not just Seattle, Portland, and the greater area. And there is this interesting connection between the desert scene in Joshua Tree and what we did in Seattle, because there are similar musicians that went to both places.
Context.
Yeah. Similar context. You have an independent scene emerging out of the desert, and the same thing in Seattle. And then we find like-minded musicians like Alan and I, and Peter has been to Joshua Tree, Dave obviously.
Yeah, and then obviously Joshua going up to Seattle for a while. And
did Chris go out there, Cornell? Did he spend?
Yeah, no, he spent a lot of time in we go in LA, obviously hanging out when we were making the record. There's a lot of cross pollination, like an extended family, really. Like we all ended up playing with each other and hanging out.
Bueno, tremendo contexto. Dos protagonistas con sus distintas realidades. Screaming Trees y Eleven eran dos bandas que no eran fáciles de llevar. Fuera de. También uno era joven en los 90. Imagínense con todo el mundo poniendo su atención en una escena que parte del underground. Eleven, todo es timing. It's all about just timing, luck. Mm-hmm. There is some other factors besides being a talented musician with a vision, with discipline and stuff. In life in general. Entonces, bueno, un tema de fortuna, un tema de timing y que coinciden que bandas tan talentosas, no solo de Seattle, también de otras áreas con mucho contexto en común, no pudieron llegar a las expectativas de la misma industria. Bandas que parten en el underground como Screaming Trees, como Eleven, incluso con otros proyectos desde los 80s, no pudieron ser el siguiente Nirvana porque no se pueden las cosas reproducir así de fácil. Hay un contexto, hay un timing y hay un talento. As musician or as a producer, do you think that rock can become big as was in the 90s in a short future?
It can return to that, you think? Me personally, I think that it's more exciting than that because it's going to be separated from the need.
As big as it was.
Yeah. It's as big as it was, but it's going to become more culturally fused. The way that classical and jazz is like. Not that it's going to be like this only art thing, but the spirit of rock, for me, the spirit of rock is unique to the music itself. It could be the rock to me is the freest. You can do anything underneath with your attitude and the feeling. So I'm really excited about it. I see and hear amazing bands coming up all the time.
You produce several modern acts.
Yeah, and some really talented kids everywhere. I just came back from Osorno. There's a band called Von Pluma that we did an amazing record together.
¿Cómo se llama?
Von Pluma.
Von Pluma.
Yeah.
Okay. Von Pluma Osorno, una banda que está trabajando con él.
Sí, y que salió increíble. Le tocó, played Barrett a song. He really does.
Oh, it's great. Really good songwriting.
Yeah.
First thing I noticed, songwriting. Yeah.
Entonces yo creo que yo tengo mucha fe en lo que, bueno, hay que tener fe, pero yo creo que no siento que se disminuye la energía. Yo siento que, mira, estamos juntos, estamos sin parar. Él está 4 meses, vamos acá, estuvimos en Joshua Tree. When were you in Joshua Tree? Right before you left for Brazil, right?
We were touring in Brazil, and then I had to come back because I played drums for Patti Smith for some shows, and we timed it to do some sessions at Joshua Tree.
Yeah, with Duke.
And so that's when, so that was in October. Yeah, 1st of October. Yeah. But yeah, I want to say something about the rock thing. It's not the most popular form in the United States. Right now it's kind of pop and hip hop, and it's not very good.
An urban genre.
Yeah, it's just like
whatever.
very average, you know. But the places that I've been around the world where rock and roll is still powerful are places where the spirit of the people is very powerful. So South America, to me, is I really love South America. I've been here for 5 months, and my wife and I just keep like learning, and you know, we're trying to become fluent in. Well, my wife is. Her first language is Spanish, so she's fluent. I'm trying to become fluent. We're trying to learn Portuguese fluently. And so South America, Australia, and New Zealand is very rock and roll because those are very free people. I think there's a connection between the two is what I'm trying to say. When your spirit is free and when you're smart and open-minded, then that kind of music is very successful. Yeah.
Hay muchos factores para tratar, es muy difícil, lo hemos conversado con distintas personas, músicos, speakers, productores, gente que colabora y que aporta en esta industria sobre si hay alguna posibilidad de tener al rock en un lugar protagónico como ocurrió en los 90. Esta radio está solventada en gran parte por esa generación de bandas que hicieron del rock una supercultura y bueno, está la esperanza de Alain, que ha producido muchos grupos locales de todo el mundo, y Barrett también, que ha estado completamente despierto a la hora de ver cómo fuera de lo más frío de las tendencias el origen y el contexto, la ciudadanía o el país o la vibra de la gente en cada país hacen también de un circuito contracultural algo muy grande. Yesterday, for this chat, I just got involved in immersed on Above album, the Above album.
Oh yeah,
very unique thing.
Yeah.
I was incredible to reviving or enjoy the jazzy parts of that album, the sense of huge emotion behind that album and that context. What do you remember from that era? For a lot of us, the Above album from that season feels like a way of escape of you guys. Escape from the industry, escape of the pressure, of the business pressure. What do you remember from that Above era? What was it like to work with some sensitive persons or characters like Lane Staley?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Mike McCready and I were just last week doing a Zoom call because this is the 30th anniversary.
Yeah.
And so we're doing a big reissue because they moved us to Sony Legacy. So we're doing all of the studio tracks, including the 3 tracks that Mark Lanigan did.
Okay.
And Peter Buck wrote one of those songs. Peter's the only other guy that came into the studio to write a song with us called Black Book of Fear. So we've done a remaster of all the studio tracks, everything we did in the studio. And then I wrote some new liner notes, and Mike wrote some new liner notes with the larger story that came out, a long time ago.
Awesome.
And so it's a beautiful gatefold vinyl. And so we're just going to be promoting the 30th anniversary of it. But what I remember about that time was that we had all been on the road for a long time, years, including all the bands we were in before we were in Screaming Trees and Alice in Chains and all of that. And we wanted to do a record where we could just really be free to experiment with songwriting and production. Because it's kind of a band-produced album. Like, Brett Eliason guided us through that process, but we all had these ideas. I was kind of bringing back my jazz training and playing upright bass and vibraphone. And Lane is the only album that's completely 100% his lyrics. And he wanted to make a spiritual statement about his life up to that point. We were only 27. And so like his insight into the spiritual nature of being a human being is profoundly focused. And Mike did some of his best guitar work in his life on that album. And I just kind of feel like the 4 of us, and then 5 with Mark Lanigan and 6 with Peter Buck, we channeled something that I've never gotten close to that. It was a really different thing. Very magical and transcendental.
And organic.
And very organic. I mean, we paid for it ourselves. We didn't have a record label behind us. We just did it. And then we ended up signing with Columbia because that was the best place for us to do it. But we did it completely free of any constraints of any label, manager, anything. And it was a completely free record. Which is, I mean, I'm not trying to compare it to the record we're doing right now with Alan and Peter and Duke, but we're kind of doing the same thing. We're making a free record that we're doing ourselves.
So there is a strong connection between both the album in terms of essence and this new upcoming project.
Yeah.
And you're going to spend a few more weeks in Chile. Bueno, 30º aniversario de Above, una super edición. Con la participación de Peter Buck también, que es parte de la historia, y también la reflexión de lidiar con sensibilidades, con tipos tremendamente creativos en el Above. Muchos de los fans más a ultranza de Matt Season saben, y Barrett nos lo confirma, Lane Staley se sintió 100% cómodo en un disco donde él participó por primera vez en su historia en la totalidad de las letras. Bien sabemos el rol importante que sigue teniendo Jerry Cantrell en la banda. Now in the Spanish cycle of this talk, of this chat.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. I'll follow. I'll listen.
You speak much better Portuguese, right?
Yes.
Than Spanish.
Yeah. But I can understand, so
okay.
I can hear what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
También Alain Johannes tiene una gira con Alain Johannes Trio. Tenemos que aprovechar. Tenemos a nuestro amigo acá que ha estado muy ocupado en el estudio. Cuéntame, con Coti Felo.
Sí, Coti Felo. Sí, con el trío acústico va a ser. Y también voy a pedirle a nuestro amigo acá si nos puede tocar con nosotros un par de temas. We'll see. I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
And live on the air. Is that okay?
Yeah, yes.
And what about
Darren, would you play on a couple tunes?
And what about Peter?
Sí, yeah. Ooh, maybe we'll figure it out.
Maybe Peter will play.
Maybe. O sea, algo tiene que ser un secreto, ¿verdad? ¿No?
We'll
see.
Lo arruinamos, lo acabamos de arruinar.
Sí, estamos tocando el Metrónomo el 8 y Totalmundos el 9.
Perfecto.
Y después vamos a sumar más fechas, pero yo tengo unos solistas el 13 de febrero en Pucón.
Please, go ahead.
Que no he conocido todavía. I haven't met it, so it's going to be great.
And you're going to bring your poncho.
Sí, mi poncho, y voy a estar cagado de calor, sudando en el escenario.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure. Increíble esta conversación, y también let's chat with Peter too, with this new adventure.
I'm sure he'll come in and talk. Absolutely.
Yeah. Bueno, Peter Buck va a estar en Chile. Tenemos un nuevo proyecto dentro de estos tipos que son tremendamente prolíficos. No les queremos quitar más tiempo, ya que los tipos están disfrutando también. Barrett está disfrutando Chile. You're going to the north, right? To the desert.
Going to the where the telescope, the National Park for Telescopes.
Incredible.
Going to look at the southern hemisphere.
Ok, y vamos a tener a nuestros amigos durante un buen tiempo, unas par de semanas, trabajando en uno de los discos que nosotros ya señalamos que va a estar entre lo más esperado por la comunidad de Sonar. Barrett Martin, Alain Johannes, dos amigos en esta entrevista Sonar, que espero la hayan disfrutado tanto como nosotros.